Hey, this is Jim. It's 12:37 p.m. in San Francisco, California on June the 6th. Please note that all discussions, analysis, and information presented are for general informational and educational purposes only and should not be construed as financial or any other form of professional advice. So I love the way this looks. The Anemoi Terminal Day Trader has the bot's flat right now, but it has a really tight three-trigger cluster. And so poised to take off to the upside. I'll start with the 5-minute, quick look at the 5-minute chart, show you the trigger orientation here and how nice this is. So you can see, actually the bot has just flipped long. You can see with price above this 461 Anemoi hourly trigger right now, in theory and in practice, we have a small air pocket here up to this 496 level. That's the daily trigger. That number will drop slightly tomorrow, so you can just use 496 as a reference. Anything above 496 is poised to accelerate to the upside toward the 545 retest level. Weekly trigger for this week's at 551, and then we've got that 580 retest level. As we get out into this area here, you guys can see, same pay me later level doesn't change, 687. Monthly trigger for June now has dropped from 803 down to 778, which syncs nicely with this 795 retest level. We could be there within a couple days if this thing kicks off the way I think it's going to. So that's the way that looks. Again, the trigger orientation couldn't be better. I want to show you guys volume because this is the key to kicking this off. Now, you guys, the last video I made, you can see where I had highlighted this downtrend and wedging volume pattern here, and made a note here that rising nesting volume is a good thing. That white line is the nesting, or what I call nesting or resting volume, which just simply means that in between these spikes to the upside, the lower spikes, the lower volume spikes down here, I consider that to be resting or nesting volume. That's as important, if not more important, than some of this other stuff that I look at, and especially more important than just the volume on a daily basis, because a stock like this can move a tremendous amount percentage-wise prior to getting a signal toward the close on daily volume closing hot. So you can see the nesting resting volume during the two prior setups that we had. Now we're above that. You can see where when we had our collision downtrend through the nesting volume that you started to see the spike. It again, front run, we saw front running by about 6 hours, so that's a common theme here. So we saw that spike. That was sort of a preemptive strike to prevent green closing bar volume from kicking off a ripping move to the upside. So what they did is they did everything they could to barely close this 60-minute bar red and buy some more time here, but they're out of time based on everything I'm looking at. In my algorithms, I can see the lifespan of an algorithm, or not mine personally, but when I'm interpreting someone else's algorithm they're running, I can see the amount of time that it's going to run and when it's going to sort of expire, when it's going to lose half of its strength, and then when it's finally going to die and go away. The last of the pinning algorithms that are being run and have been run for multiple weeks now fade away tomorrow, and that's down at the 5-minute fractal level. It'll be fighting against zones of strength coming from the 60-minute all the way up to the daily. So we could see this thing kick off right out of the gate tomorrow morning, but if it takes several hours before we start to see the stock lift, that wouldn't surprise me either. Quick note on volume, we're still looking for a 3.9 million share green print, so closing volume bar, 60-minute volume bar, green close, so above the prior bar, and we're looking for 3.9 million shares or greater. We've done a nice job here printing. This was a green bar, green bar, green bar. This was a red bar right here. So we're already trending nicely to the upside with this morning's green bar, but what we need to do is we need to engulf this prior red bar right here. So that's why we need 3.9 million shares or greater. Another note here, this still stands. Any 10 million share or greater 60-minute green closing bar can start to trend sharply higher. So this is when you would see, this would be our first positive sign, especially if it happens tomorrow. And then a 10 million share print on a green closing bar would tell us that the trajectory of the advance can steepen. And so you start to get more of that, really optimistic look to the chart and a lot of attention in the trading world to where you can bring in even more volume. And then if we were to kick through this 15 million share or greater, 3 consecutive bars, that equals ignition volume, that would equal a melt up. And at that point, if you see 3 60-minute bars running at 15 million shares or greater, all 3 consecutive bars closing green, we can attack this 2125 retest level very, very quickly. Taking you back to just this basic structure, really basic structure here, you guys remember, this was the January low, stock move up, down, higher high up, and then they ran through stops. So, in theory, you have stop losses here also. You'd be shooting a trend line off of this uptrend, so a lot of people would choose to hide below this level with stops. Algorithm runs down through the stops, V bottoms, and then just melts straight up toward this speed line attack. A little throw over on that wick and then collapse. They move below that low, below that low. Starts a new structure, so the equivalent of this, up, down, up. We had anticipated they probably wanted to run stops, and we were hoping they'd retest our 455 level. They did both, and now you see how they're holding as hard as they can here to prevent that kind of a V. If you look and think of this in terms of like an inverse head and shoulders bottom pattern, this would have been a left shoulder, this would have been a head, and you'd be waiting for a right shoulder to form. It just melts straight to the speed line. Here you can make an argument that you have a left shoulder head and really raggedy, grinding right shoulder. So they're trying as hard as they can to prevent this thing from lifting until the very last minute. But the moment of truth comes tomorrow. In my work, you can see this price box here. First attack should be this 543 hidden retest level, then the 580 retest level. This is the speed line, the current speed line. So assuming that we're sitting right about here right now and about to attack this speed line, again, it would still just be up around the 670 level. Kind of interesting match with some of the Anemoi triggers. What I think we'll end up doing, and I have a note here, this is super important, is if this zone of strength is as powerful and long-lasting as I think it is here during the month of June, what will end up happening is we'll attack this speed line very quickly. We'll have a throw over like we had right here, but then what you'll see is you'll see price pull back and do what the old-timers call a kiss back, and then this speed line resistance will become support. So speed line should become support if we're going to melt up. At that point, you start to move back up in another leg, and then that's when you can really take off, and that would coincide most likely with something into that 15 million share 60-minute green bar type range. And then it's just, it's inevitable that we'll get at least one of those this month if this thing is anywhere near what I think it's going to be. But the key is we have to get 3 in a row, 15 million or more. If we do that, we're off to the races. One more thing to look at. Here are hidden retest levels through the technique I use for behavioral analysis. So you can see the 543 that I just showed you in the 580, but then just look at all these retest levels. So again, anything above, I'd say 995 will probably require ignition volume. But if we get that ignition volume, we could sail through a lot of these very, very quickly. You guys know if you follow my work that hidden retest level, once it's hit, becomes vibration. But in a melt up, you can go straight through in what I call a cascade. and just rocket through, all of the retest levels, and then get slammed back down and stair step and do all the vibration on your way back down. So it's not common, but I've seen it happen before. You can see the little nesting volume pattern sitting right here. Here's the box in front of us, and volume starting to heat up a little bit. Something I want to show you guys that's interesting. A lot of times if you look at volume spikes, I've drawn red lines off of those volume spikes. What you'll find is that there is a commonality between the amount of time it takes for volume spike to revisit the downtrend line. So here's an example. If I just use this little box as our timing element, and we start at that, we start at this spike high. So you've got your 2 points of contact. The reason I'm able to draw a valid trend line is because this nesting or resting volume in this point on the right-hand side, so in the future off of that spike high, is lower than this. So if you think in terms of like a regular price chart, this would be a down, up, lower, low, because the nesting volume's lower than this. So that allows me to draw this valid downtrend. You can't just shoot random downtrends off of these volume spikes and use my the methodology I use. There are really, really strict rules around it. So anyway, we have this point of origin. I'm stretching all the way down until finally a volume bar spikes up into that downtrend. And what you'll find is we're sitting basically right at that point. Now, doesn't mean it has to happen immediately, but you can see because of the slight slope of this downtrend line drawn off of these volume spikes that it would require volume all the way up into the 25, 28 million share range just to make contact. So to my eye, that's also super encouraging. Again, we only need 15 million shares per 60-minute bar, 3 consecutive bars to trigger ignition volume and see a true melt up. Can't stress enough that the Anemoi terminal is not properly aligned right now to see a melt up and a sustained uptrend. We can have a melt up at any given time. I mean, the setups, sometimes a setup is much better than another. It was really predictable back in May, June of 2021 when I came public with that call that was a true melt up and position to where it was positioned for a melt up and it was positioned to remain high for weeks or months. This setup, if we were to melt up suddenly, and especially if we were to start to get above the $21 range, would argue for a violent snap right back down again. So, I'll try to post videos if we do get lucky enough to really take off to the upside. But keep in mind that these two setups are completely different. The 700% move in May, June of 2021, velocity-wise, price velocity-wise right now would compare more to maybe a 100 to 300% move. And even at that, again, we'd need to snap back because the high 7s, low 8s, that's going to be a sticky level. The other thing I want to show you guys with relation to this particular chart is you'll see these 3 horizontal lines, and my note here, $12.50 to $16 is very noisy, so it's vibration on the way back up. This is another different technique I use that argues for sort of a stubborn setup and not a move straight up to all-time highs. I'll show you the reason behind those, behind the stickiness of those particular levels. So if you go all the way back to the all-time high from May, June, and you just shoot valid trend lines, and in my work, a valid trend line is, a move down, up, lower, low. You got to take out that low before I'll draw that trend line. And then what I want to do is I want to see where price breaks trend. Where price breaks trend, that's important because that's what creates, in some cases, hidden retest levels. In other cases, at least a vibration level. So you can see from this downtrend here and that simple break, if you just use some of the tools I'm showing you, that you would have been able to anticipate that's a very important price level, and it was going to create this long drawn out vibration, which it did. Here's your second downtrend line I'm drawing from a down, up, lower, low, so it's valid. Here's your third, down, high, lower, low again. So now if I move to the right-hand side here, you'll see another point of origin here, which creates another vibration level, and then another point of origin here, another point of origin right here, okay? The other thing that's happened, and you'll see this frequently if you use this behavioral analysis method, you'll see that a hidden retest level that becomes vibration can become a trend break of a future hidden retest level or vibration. So you'll start to see these things sync up. And again, the more lasting the decline or advance, so the more important the trend line that you're breaking, the longer you're going to see this vibration sequence. It's simply psychologically the bulls versus the bears battling one another. So it's like they're trying to decide, is price going to move into a new uptrend above this move, or are the bears going to take over, and is this going to be a consolidation followed by a downtrend, which was the case here. So this is human nature. Whether the algorithms are tuned to pick up on that or not, they probably are. But I can just tell you guys that the human emotion that creates this kind of price action has been going on since for well over 100 years in everything I've studied. So anyway, that's that. Again, everything looks great. Look for those volume characteristics to really start to kick things into the upside, but beautiful looking zone of strength tomorrow. And again, that algorithm that's been pinning the stock will release tomorrow. I'm not going to tell you guys the exact time. I have the exact time down to a minute, but I'm not going to mention it publicly. But it will release tomorrow at some point. When it releases, you'll know, because the stock will start to move significantly higher and at the same trajectory that we've set up on this on these advances off the V bottoms that we put in. That's it from my side, you guys. Good luck.